Doran Martell is one of the most interesting and subversive characters that George R. R. Martin has ever written. When we first meet Doran, he's portrayed to us as this cowardly man, someone who gets walked all over. With the Sand Snakes and his daughter, Aegon, constantly trying to push his boundaries and trying to get him to become a more active player in the Game of Thrones. Constantly insulting him by stating the damage that has been done to House Martell by the Lannisters. Throwing Elia Martell's death at him, believing that Doran doesn't have the same anger and emotional resentment that they do. And for 80% of A Feast for Crows, Doran Martell does seem like the kind of man who refuses to take action. But there are hints throughout the book that he is much, much more than he seems to be. For starters, the way Doran speaks throughout A Feast for Crows, he just always seems to be holding something back. Possibly hiding his true plans behind this veil of a feeble and sickly man. And the first time that Doran's true genius sneaks into the story is when he is able to cut off his daughter's plans and remain in control of House Martell and over Myrcella Baratheon. After doing this, we find out through one of the most underrated chapters in A Song of Ice and Fire, The Princess in the Tower, that Doran Martell has actually been playing the long game this entire time. That he hasn't just been cowardly and been hiding, he's been making plans. Big ones. In this chapter, we also get some of the most badass dialogue in A Song of Ice and Fire. With Doran quoting that while his brother Oberyn was the Red Viper, a viper requires cool and calm grass to lure in prey, and he has and will always be the grass that hid his brother. Not only that, but Oberyn going to King's Landing wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment decision made by Oberyn. It was a very tactical move made by both Doran and Oberyn as a part of a grand plan to get back at the Lannisters and avenge Elia Martell. And to make matters even crazier, Doran Martell doesn't just want revenge in the usual sense. No. He wants justice of the highest order. Fire and blood. And with that, Doran Martell reveals that not only did he have a plan to marry Aegon to Viserys once upon a time, but he has also only been giving his daughter suitors that he knew she would reject in order to make it seem like he wasn't just waiting around. And to make matters even crazier, he has sent his son Quentyn on a journey across the world to claim Daenerys' hand in marriage and come back to Dorne with dragons. So with that being said, do I think Doran Martell is some strategic genius that's long game is ultimately going to pay off, or do I think he is going to crash and burn in the Winds of Winter? And unfortunately for him, I think Doran's ending will land somewhere in the middle. The first reason that I believe this has everything to do with Quentyn Martell's journey in A Dance with Dragons. As many of you know, in Quentyn Martell's final chapter of A Dance with Dragons, titled The Dragon Tamer, he seems to have died after being burned by Rhaegal. I say seems to have died because while I do think it's highly likely that he did end up dying, there is a small chance that I think he's still alive. For those of you who want to hear more about this theory, I'd recommend checking out Preston Jacobs' video from like a decade ago, or if you want something more recent, check out Quinn the GM's video from like a week ago. I will eventually make my own video on this, but I thoroughly agree with most of their analysis. But regardless over whether or not Quentyn is alive or dead, this doesn't really change the eventual outcome that I have in mind. Assuming that Quentyn is actually dead, Doran's plan of getting a physical dragon has been squashed. With him out of the picture, and Daenerys in the middle of the Dothraki Sea, there is no chance that Doran will be able to get enough power from Daenerys to launch a realistic attack against the crown. And even on the off chance that Quentyn is alive, with everything else going on in Meereen, I don't see any outcome where Daenerys joins forces with Doran. And the reason that I believe this is because as far as the Winds of Winter sample chapters, it seems like Martell will end up wed to Aegon Targaryen. And this alliance between Aegon and the Martells will end up being the downfall of Doran himself. Now, this is a whole separate video for another day, but I personally believe that Aegon's conquest of Westeros will ultimately end in his own destruction. Between Jon Con slowly losing his mind due to grayscale and general paranoia, Aegon most likely being a pretender or a Blackfire, and deep down, Aegon just simply not being the man that he wants to be, I just don't see any other conclusion for Aegon's conquest of Westeros other than it ending in tragedy. I heard a theory recently, and unfortunately I don't know where I saw it, but the theory is that Aegon's conclusion will be Tommen Baratheon's conclusion from the TV show, where he leaps from the window of the Red Keep, and I honestly feel like this could be a super fitting, tragic end to his story. And to pull this back to Doran Martell, because I believe that Aegon's conquest will not end in victory, I believe that Doran's alliance with Aegon won't be successful. Do I think there is potential for Doran to get a semblance of revenge and maybe partial satisfaction in terms of justice regarding House Lannister? Yeah. But to me, I view a true victory only being confirming the future security and safety of one's house. And aligning himself with Aegon Targaryen will not give him or his family that security. Now ultimately, I do think that House Martell will live and make it through the entire story, but I do not believe that Doran Martell will. I believe that in the Winds of Winter, Doran Martell will find himself fully committed to a war that he isn't sure will actually end up paying off. Ironically enough, I believe that Doran joining Aegon's forces will be the first time in his entire life that he actually jumps the gun. This not only makes a lot of sense regarding his personal journey throughout A Feast for Crows, but it also matches George R. R. Martin's writing style of tragic irony. I believe that Doran Martell would end up being far more successful if he actually continued to wait for Daenerys Targaryen and join forces with her instead of Aegon. So for the first time in Doran Martell's life, he will make the mistake of acting too soon and not being patient enough. And I think this will ultimately be his downfall. So to answer the question over whether or not Doran Martell is a strategic genius or a foolish man, I feel the answer is somewhere in the middle. I feel his overall devotion to the long game will do just enough for the survival of his house, but the probability of him joining forces with Aegon and making the first quick and rash move of his entire life will ultimately be a destructive personal downfall for Doran. I just want to say a quick thank you to the people who requested this video in my video from a few days back. Please let me know in the comments below this one what other videos you would like to see in the future. I am really excited to keep this page growing and flourishing, and I love making this kind of content for all of you. But yeah, with all of that being said, thank you so much for making it this far, and I hope you have an amazing day. Peace.